After processing my tomatoes, this is what I'm left with. It's very watery. Even though I did have some paste tomatoes, I just used all my tomatoes. So this is a very, very watery. So this is going to cook in my slow cooker probably all night and reduce down. And then I will bring y'all back and show y'all how I make my canned spaghetti sauce. Because this has got to really, I mean, this is just almost like tomato juice. It's really going to have to cook down a lot. But it will. And it'll actually be even better because it will have cooked and cooked and cooked and cooked and cooked and cooked. Alright, so just wanted to get this part of the step of the process and show y'all what I'm doing. And I will bring y'all back when we're to finish up.
Hey y'all, it's Angela here at the Chicken Coop, and today I'm going to show y'all how I make my homemade spaghetti sauce. Depending on what type of tomato that you grow, you might not have enough harvest to really process and make a huge batch and can tomatoes up. So one of the things that you can do is you can just wash those tomatoes and put them in gallon bags, Ziploc bags, and throw them in your freezer and collect all those tomatoes that you have that you're gleaning from your garden throughout the year. And that's what I did, because for some reason my tomatoes did not do very well this year, but over the long haul I did get a sufficient amount of tomatoes. Plus, because I was sick the month of July, I missed out on a lot of things the month of July, so I probably had some tomatoes out there that, you know, went way past their prime, or the bugs got in them or something, that I ended up throwing out to my chickens, giving to my chickens. They died on the vine. All sorts of things happened. I just, because of my sickness, my family's illness, through the month of July, none of my garden got accomplished. So this is my last jar of the spaghetti sauce that I made last year. So it is time, we're ready to go for tomatoes, because I need to make some more. Do it the old-fashioned way, where you bring the water up to a boil in a big stock pot, you put the tomatoes in there, and as you see the peelings kind of breaking and separating them, you scoop those tomatoes out, put them on an ice bath, put them in a bowl, let them cool off, and then they're easy to peel. You can core them and all that kind of stuff. That's one way. That's the old-fashioned way. That's the way I've done it for years and years and years. That's the only way I knew to do it. But the only bad thing, the only drawback about that is your tomatoes are only going to last so long. So to get enough to process all those tomatoes, sometimes it's, you know, it's just little bits here, little bits here, little bits here. The way you can do it if you put them in the freezer is there's two ways after that you can do them. When you take them out of the freezer, I put mine, I filled up my sink with some warm hot water, dumped the bags in there, kind of rinsed them off, and as they got into that warm water, then their skin started breaking and peeling just like the boiling process, and you can peel off those peelings. Now you can still do it manually and cut those cores out and, you know, use your tomatoes that way, and I've done it that way before. But this year I went ahead and bought the attachment for my KitchenAid mixer, and I put it through the vegetable strainer on my KitchenAid mixer and processed my tomatoes that way. That was an okay way. I liked it, but one of the drawbacks I felt like for it was, I feel like my sauce is runnier than normal because of that, because I don't have the bigger chunks of the tomato. It all got processed through there. Normally my tomato sauce, it doesn't bother me to have tomato seeds in my tomato sauce, so when you see my tomato sauce, it's got seeds in it. That vegetable strainer grinder pushes all those seeds and that core and all that kind of stuff out, so you don't have that, and you're just left with this vegetable that is strained through a strainer. So it's a lot runnier than what I'm used to. So that's one thing. So I've had my tomatoes cooking in my roaster. They cooked they cooked all night and all day, but I haven't had them turned up high, just to try to cook off some of that liquid and condense them down. And so it's been cooking a while in my roaster just on low. And now we are at the point to make the spaghetti sauce. It still is a little bit runny to me, but I don't want, this could just take forever. I don't want to end up with tomato paste. I just want a thicker tomato sauce. So I did buy some tomato paste. But even recipes that I've seen on different cooking shows, true Italians, they might have their tomatoes, but they use tomato paste to thicken their sauce. So I don't feel like I'm veering away from a good recipe just by using some sauce. Normally I don't use some sauce. I just, my tomatoes, and it is a little bit runny, I would say. But so this year I thought, since I do have so much liquid, I am going to add some tomato paste. So let me go over the ingredients. Now, normally I use my own garlic powder, but I had a fiasco last year with my garlic. I never really got around to telling that story. I had a video about how I harvested my garlic, I peeled my garlic, I dried my garlic, and then I don't have any more videos after that. But it's been a year now, so I can talk about it. I had peeled all my garlic, and it was in a bowl. And it was on the counter in a bowl, because the next day or two I was going to end up chopping it up and putting in my food processor, chopping it up, and then putting it in my dehydrator to dehydrate to make my garlic powder like I always do. For some reason, I don't know what happened, my husband got distracted. He put the bowl that I had my garlic in on top of the refrigerator. Well, your refrigerator, it has a little bit of heat in it, because they even tell you like to sprout your seeds or whatever, to put it up on top of your refrigerator, so it has a little bit of heat to it. Well, my garlic molded. It molded. Before like the next day when I'm like getting ready to process my garlic, and I'm like, where is my bowl? And my bowl was on top of the refrigerator. My husband felt so bad. It was so bad, y'all, I cried about this. And I couldn't talk about it because it was just like that was a whole year's worth of process down the tubes, and that can happen in homesteading. It just can happen. So last year, this whole last year, I've had a little bit of my garlic powder left from the year before. So this whole year, I've not been able to use my own garlic powder. But normally I have my own garlic powder. So in substitute of that, I have some organic garlic powder. Now, I usually have basil. This is my own basil that I have dried and processed, so I have basil. Normally I also have my own oregano, but I used it up on the last batch that I did, and because of July, me not being out in the garden, I haven't cut my oregano and processed and dehydrated oregano, so I'm out of oregano. But I do have my own basil, so I have some oregano here. Of course, salt and pepper, and then onions and bell peppers. That I do have videos that shows how I process my onions and how I store them in the freezer. And of course, you can see my onion harvest here. They're starting to sprout, so I need to get these cut up and chopped up and do the same thing for them. Here is my garlic harvest from this year. I'm gonna, it's about time to plant garlic, so I'll pull off the bigger garlic heads and get those planted, and then hopefully this year I'll have a video of how I process my garlic powder. So let's get started. So I'm back. I wanted to show y'all, I've added two cans of tomato paste to this sauce, and let me just kind of show you how thick it is right now. I may still need to add another jar to this, another can, but let's see how it is after I add my vegetables. Here is my bell peppers and my onions. They were in the freezer. They're still kind of, they're just starting to get thawed out. And I don't skimp on the bell peppers and the onions because I always have a good harvest of all that. So we're just going to saute these in some olive oil. And I don't skip on the olive oil. I probably had at least a half an inch of olive oil in these onions and bell peppers in this skillet. I love this skillet because it is deep and it's old. And I can't remember what kind it is. But I got this at I think I got this at Goodwill, and it was not in bad shape. It had a little bit of rust on it, but I came home and cleaned it up and seasoned it back up, and I love this skillet. I love it because it's deep. All right, so we're just gonna let this sit here and kind of saute, and I'll bring y'all back. Cooking these vegetables down a little bit, and I want to get a little bit of the liquid, you know, that's rendered off of these onions and bell peppers, a little bit of that gone before I add it to my sauce, or I'm just going to have an even runnier sauce. And this was about, I use those little snack bags to put my onions in, and then I put those little snack bags into a freezer bag and store them that way so that I can get out like an individual size amount of onions and bell peppers. And this was like 4 of those snack bags full of onions and 4 bell peppers. So it would probably be the equivalent of like a medium onion chopped up if it's in each bag. And you know, just a medium size, not a big old huge bell pepper, but probably just a nice size bell pepper chopped up. This is getting very close, but I want a little bit more of that liquid gone. So I wanted to kind of show y'all close up. These onions and bell peppers. And I have red bell peppers and orange bell peppers and green bell peppers, all sorts of colors in there that were from my garden. And these were actually onions and bell peppers from 2020. So I'm not even finished with my onions and bell peppers from 2020 yet. But see how it doesn't have hardly any more liquid left in it? Just a little bit, but that's just about where I want it. So I'm going to add this to my sauce. I'm doing this with my left hand. I'm holding it with my right because my right arm is stronger than my left. I'm doing this with my left, trying to get all these little bits and pieces out. All right, I had to get that last little bit out. I'm kind of old school like my grandma. I got to get all the little bits and pieces. I actually think I need more onion and bell pepper. So let me do a whole nother skillet full of that. I'll be back. All right, so while we're waiting for those onions and bell peppers to finish up, let's go ahead and start trying to season this spaghetti sauce. So I'm gonna put a little bit of salt in here. This is about a tablespoon of salt. And of course, I'm gonna have to taste this and just see how it is. This is a huge roaster full of spaghetti sauce. And I'm just making it to taste. My taste, our family's taste, how we like it. Probably another tablespoon of pepper. With garlic. Now, like I say, this is my own basil. It's still pretty leafy. good handfuls of that. And this is the oregano. So let's just stir this in, see where we're at. Starting to smell like spaghetti sauce. I went and got my son to help hold the skillet while we poured this stuff, rest of these onions and bell peppers. So I went ahead and cooked 3 more packages of onions and 3 more packages of bell peppers. Let me add this in here. And I tasted it in the meantime while that was cooking, and it was pretty spot on. Everything tasted good, like I had enough of all my seasonings. All right, so I went ahead and got my ball canning book. I'm gonna go over the processing times and everything on canning this. So I'm looking at the seasoned tomato sauce. I did not use that recipe, but it's very, very similar. And it says, let me get on the next page because it talks about it. You also, like when you can this up and you fill your jars, add some citric acid. You could either use 1/4 teaspoon of citric acid or 1 tablespoon of bottled lemon juice in each jar. And the reason why you do that is because tomatoes aren't as acidic as they used to be. Your grandma probably just canned tomatoes and didn't worry about it, but the tomatoes aren't as acidic. All the new varieties that we have are not as acidic, so for them to can and last longer, putting a little bit of citric acid or lemon juice will extend their shelf life for that. That's kind of a preservative. You're going to ladle the hot sauce into the jar, leaving a 1/2 inch headspace. You're going to remove any air bubbles. You're going to clean the jar and the rim, put on a clean lid, adjust the bands, fingertip tight. You're going to place the jar on an elevated rack in your water bath canner. Because this is tomato sauce and because you're adding the citric acid to it, you can water bath can this because it does not have meat. This does not have meat. I cook my meat separately and then add a jar of sauce to my meat, just like I would buy, a jar of spaghetti sauce from the store and cook. So then when you get all your jars in there, you're going to lower your jars into the boiling water. You're going to process pints for 35 minutes and quart jars for 40 minutes. Cover them with the cover. And your water needs to be about 1 inch above the canning jar lid. 1 inch above the canning jar lid. And then once they process for that amount of time, for whatever size jars you use, you turn off the heat and you remove the cover and you let it cool for about 5 minutes before you remove your jars. And then you remove your jars from your canner. You do not retighten the bands if they're loose, and you let it cool for 12 hours. And then you test the seal and label and store your jars. And you can take, once they've sat for 24 hours, 12 to 24 hours, you can take the seals off the jars and wash the jars. Don't leave the seals on your jars because you could get what's called a false seal. So I wanted to I knew all that in my head, but I wanted to make sure that I gave y'all the exact processing information from the Ball book of canning, and so you would have your correct information. So y'all, thanks for visiting with me, and we're on to another project. I picked pears the other day off my pear tree, so I'll probably do some kind of project with my pear tree. And I will talk to y'all later. Thanks for visiting with me. Bye-bye. So here's what the finished sauce looks like. Doesn't that look yummy? Look how thick it is. We're outside after processing all my tomatoes. This was the scrap bowl with the seeds and the pulp and yeah, go ahead, and the skins. And my son's out here with me. He's cleaning up this bowl right here for the chicken coop because I've got
3 roosters in there. I need to cull down to about 2, but I've got 3, maybe 4 roosters in there. And one rooster's got spurs on it, probably about 1.5 inches long, that are very wicked. And he's not mean, but he's getting to looking at me real strange and funny, and I just don't like that. Logan, see that? See those spurs right there on him? He will get you if he gets you. So we're fixing to give them these scraps. So even though my chickens don't get out a lot to go peck around and get the summertime, they get all these good vegetables that are processed. And they get a lot of that stuff, a lot of good fresh stuff given to them to eat on. We had some pears that had some bad spots on it, so we gave them that. And that bowl is going to be gone in just a few minutes.